Hi guys, and welcome back to our channel Sarang and Charvari. So firstly, a huge thank you for all the love you have given to our previous videos as well as the increasing number of subscribers. If you think we don't notice, we definitely do notice. So a big thanks and a shout out to all of you. This one is also a classic shout out. I forgot the username, but somebody had mentioned, like in our previous video, I had mentioned that I had a discussion with Sarang, which was very interesting about the working of an AC. And I would say this in layman terms because he used the word thermodynamics of an AC. But I was like, okay, that's too
Yeah.
expansive. So I used the layman term. But somebody said that Sharang needs that was actually funny.
Yeah.
Sharang needs to be in a cult
No,
for
he is in a cult
yeah,
for
he
yeah.
is in a cult. Right.
So, but yeah, and I thought, hey, for why the hell not? This is like actually a pretty cool and interesting idea. So, thermodynamics, as the name suggests, is derived from two words like thermo, which is like heat, and dynamics, which is like stands for movement or motion, right? So, it is the science of the movement of heat or the transfer of heat from one object to another. And why is thermodynamics important? Because the three laws of thermodynamics are underlie some of the basic principles and provide key insights as to the workings of things as varied as all the way from the Big Bang to the working of the universe, all the way to like the working of a cell and basic chemical reactions. So the three laws of thermodynamics underlie the mechanisms or help explain the mechanisms which help the world run or which are critical to the functioning of this world. So today we would like to talk about that in the context of something like an air conditioner. So the way an air conditioner works is actually pretty simple. So in this room, like we are in the hot Indian summer. So in this sweltering heat, let's say we turn on the AC, right? What happens is that the hot air in this room will be sucked in by the AC.
Right.
Then this air will be taken to like a system where the heat of this hot air will be transferred to some substance known as a coolant. Now this coolant has like a carrying capacity or like it's able to absorb heat quite efficiently.
I'm
And
so sorry, I have just
yes,
one question.
no
Like,
problem.
what is this coolant made of?
I think it's made of simple gases. So I'm
Oh,
forgetting
I
the
see.
exact chemical structure,
Right.
but essentially the coolant is something that can absorb heat. It
Hmm.
evaporates faster. That
Hmm.
is, its boiling point is so water, as you know, boils at 100 degrees Celsius. So
Obviously, yeah.
the coolant in an AC is something which has a boiling point significantly less than that of water. Because of that, it boils fast. But why is that important? Is because for that to boil, the heat needs to be transferred from the hot air all the way to this coolant. Once this process is done, what does that mean? Because heat is taken away from the hot air, that means that the air is now cooler. This air is now released back into the room that we are sitting in. That is why the AC blows cold air, right? But that part just involves basic heat transfer. What is the cool part is that once you take air, once this hot coolant, which
Yeah.
is now completely heated, is taken outside. Like as outside, as in outside the room, right? So an AC has two compartments. One is
Yeah.
the inside face. One is that face which faces the inside of the room, and another which is like located
Oh,
outside.
yeah. You have that big box with the fan in it.
Yes,
So that
yes.
is okay.
Exactly.
Right.
So then this coolant is circulated through that big box, as she said, and in this, the coolant is first compressed, and then it is like cooled down again. So it was hot earlier, it is compressed, and then the fan blows over the coolant and it blows hot air, right? Oh, sorry, it blows and then the heat of the coolant is then transferred to the air,
Right,
which is
right.
why AC blows hot air on the inside, out in the outside
On
of
the
the room,
outside, yeah.
and cold air inside of the room, right?
Okay.
And because this coolant is then now cool again, this process can start again. So
Oh.
now the process where the first step, right, where hot air was taken from the room and it was subjected to cooling by the coolant by transfer of heat, this process can start again. So what is happening right now essentially is a transfer of heat from inside the room to outside the room, right? So why or how is thermodynamics at all related to this? Because in nature, right, or in the if you usually have one room which is cold, right, and it is present in the environment, then what will happen is that the room will eventually heat up with time until its temperature is same as the temperature of the ambient atmosphere or ambient surroundings.
Okay.
Right? Because heat, right, of the from the surroundings will slowly flow into the room.
Correct.
Similarly, if the room is too hot, then the heat will flow outside of the room. That is because nature tends towards equilibrium or thermodynamic equilibrium. So, if there is a system where there is a difference of temperatures between two objects, then the system, if left to its own devices, will naturally tend towards like a thermodynamic equilibrium where both of the objects in question are of equal temperature. Now, how do you create a state where this, like let's say we turn on the AC and the inside is 25 degrees Celsius, whereas outside it can be up to 40 degrees Celsius. So how do you maintain this? For that, you need to go against the thermodynamic equilibrium, right? So the universe or the laws of physics tend towards thermodynamic equilibrium, and to push them or to push the room towards in the other direction, you have to input energy, which is why the AC needs energy to function. You need to input energy and uh, how do you say, like work against thermodynamic equilibrium.
And this energy that is used is electrical energy, which explains all the immense bills that you get in the month of April and May.
Yes. And this brings us to the law of thermodynamics, which states that when work is done by a system, that system tends to lose energy. On the other hand, when work is done on a system gains energy. So, what do I mean by that? To simplify this explanation, think of a piston, right? A standard, what we call a pitchkari, like a water squirter, right? So, and imagine a water squirter which is sealed at one end and it is full of air, right? So, what happens if I take the lever and I push the lever inside? In this case, because I'm pushing, right? I'm expanding mechanical energy and I'm expanding it into pushing the air into a more and more tight concentration. Because of this, the pressure of the air will obviously increase. But that means that the potential energy held by that system, it will now increase, and that will manifest in terms of the fact that the piston has higher pressure now. So if I then let go of the piston, more of the times it will slide right back, simply because the air pressure will also wish to equalize. So why is this at all relevant, and how is this related? Because you need to understand certain basic facts about nature and the world. And because the AC needs to function, it has to continuously do work so AC in simple terms is a heat pump, where it continuously takes heat away from a source where there's already less heat and pumps it outside. And that is why when you have a bunch of ACs, actually the temperature increases because you're continuously taking heat away from the rooms and putting it out into the air. And the laws of thermodynamics are pretty cool. And these are the laws which are involved in this AC. And I'll just run through them once to give a basic idea. And this is obviously, sorry.
No, I was just saying, so science students, if you want to ace your exams, I think I remember engineering exams are in the month of May, and this is a very popular question that is asked, just a tip out there. So if you want to ace your exams, then you should really learn from him.
No, yes, but I'll need to I was very. This was a very brief explanation, so this was more from popular science. So pretty sure that this needs a lot of study and mechanical equations and mathematics of it. So I'll just give a brief rundown, like called the 4 laws of thermodynamics for the layman. I know I said there were 3, but that is because there's literally a zeroth law of thermodynamics, which just means that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transferred from place to place. Now, anyone who knows Einstein knows that E equal to mc square, which means that the first law of the zeroth law of thermodynamics is kind of not true, right? So this is the zeroth law of thermodynamics. Then we come to the first law, right? And please, in the comments, any chemistry students, engineering students, please correct me because I'm a biologist, so I'm slightly speaking outside of my purview. Then there's a law of thermodynamics which indicates that whenever work is done by a system or on a system, so whenever work is done by a system, the energy of that system tends to decrease. On the other hand, when work is done on a system, the energy of that system tends to increase.
Oh.
Then we have a law of thermodynamics which states that the entropy of any isolated system tends to increase with time. So
Okay.
entropy essentially refers to the state of disorder. So like a classic example which is given is that, let's say, a room, right? And for someone as messy as me, this is particularly relevant. If you
So
just
it's Sharang's room. I
yes,
mean, not everyone's room. So
if
if
you
you wanna,
just
yeah.
if you just leave a room to its own devices, 2 days later it's in utter chaos. But basically, the reason for this for the increased entropy of an isolated system is the fact that the number of states which are chaotic states, right, are much more than the number of states which are ordered. That is why that is why the system tends to achieve a kind of equilibrium, right? Because it is trying to explore all possible avenues, and simply it goes to the avenue of disorder. So, for example, if there are gas molecules in this room, right? There is a statistical probability that all gas molecules will just be clustered in one corner of the room and will die of suffocation, right? But if you actually observe any room, then the gas molecules will be distributed more or less uniformly, simply because according to random statistical probability, the it is highly unlikely that at any given moment all the gas molecules will just be clustered in one space. So that is why, as time goes on, the entropy or the state of disorder and the multiple variations of the system tends to increase. Then we come to the final law, which is my favorite, and these are not in order that I've mentioned. Right. So we come to the law of thermodynamics, which happens to be my favorite, which is the law which states that of spontaneity of a chemical reaction. So the equation for this law is delta G equal to delta H minus T delta S. But this is a law which decides the spontaneity or of a chemical reaction. So how do you decide it, right? So when you burn carbon and, like, let's say you take a chunk of wood and you set it on fire, right? It will burn and then it will release some energy through burning, right? So why does the opposite not happen, right? So because in chemistry there's always an arrow pointing back if you look at any chemical reaction. So why does it never happen that carbon dioxide then just randomly dissociates to become carbon and oxygen back? That is because the energy, if you calculate the total energy present within a molecule of oxygen and a molecule of carbon dioxide, right? And then you look at the amount of so individually, right? The amount of energy in the chemical bonds of an oxygen molecule and the amount of energy present in carbon. If you look at that energy and the energy present or between the bonds of a carbon dioxide molecule, the net energy of the carbon dioxide molecule will be lower. And that is why whenever you burn a hunk of wood, there is release of energy, because that balance of energy is released in the form of heat and light, and that is essentially fire, right? So because of that, the net energy of the system is lower than the energy that we started off with, and that is why the system will tend towards that state. So carbon dioxide, that is why carbon and oxygen will become carbon dioxide, because that state of carbon dioxide is a lower energy state and therefore easier to maintain. And this in brief is a very brief layman's overview of the laws of thermodynamics. Another thing that I would like to talk, and this is the final thing, is the state of dynamic equilibrium. So right now we all talked about equilibrium, right? What is that? It is a state where things are balanced. So it can be in terms of balance of energy. It can be in terms of like the disordered or ordered states, etc. So any system will tend towards equilibrium according to the laws of thermodynamics, right? Um, However, there are two kinds of equilibrium. One is known as static equilibrium and one is dynamic equilibrium. So dynamic equilibrium is a state where there are two opposing forces and they are holding an object in place. So imagine a ball which is being pushed from both sides. That is dynamic equilibrium. But because as long as the forces are equal, it will stay in place. On the other hand, static equilibrium is just a ball placed on the table. There's no force acting on it and therefore it is stationary. Um, so if you want to look at the human body, right, what the human body does is that we basically burn food, right? We take carbon products in terms of carbohydrates or proteins. We subject them to degradation or burning via oxygen, and slowly, in step-by-step reaction, in a series of controlled chemical reactions, in other words known as metabolism, we convert that to carbon dioxide, which we respirate. And that energy, which is released, which in nature would be released in the form of heat and light normally, we release and store in the form of ATP or adenosine triphosphate. And adenosine triphosphate is a molecule with intermediate energy, and then this molecule is known as the energy currency of the cell. This molecule can then be used to communicate with other things in the sense that it can donate a phosphate moiety to other molecules and serve to either activate or deactivate certain chemical compounds, enzymes, so on and so forth. And this the human body essentially and is that kind of dynamic equilibrium. Why is it a dynamic equilibrium? Because we're continuously breaking down food, but we're also creating more tissue, right? So catabolism, where we're breaking down food; anabolism, where we're building some muscle, we're building tissue, we're building lost skin, we're building new neuronal connections when you listen to an interesting YouTube video, etc., etc. So the human body is in this state of dynamic equilibrium. And this state is different from a state of static equilibrium. And to maintain the human body in dynamic equilibrium, you continuously need to keep on putting in energy. So that is, thermodynamically speaking, that is what life is. That is when a cell is said to be living, because it is continuously expending, or it is continuously, how do you say, utilizing the burning the energy obtained via burning of carbon to then do certain cellular processes which are critical to life. And I think this is a good place to end.
I mean, that was great. The reason why, he decided to do this video is this discussion just sparked out of, randomness. And I think the best discussions are always the most random. So thank you, Sharang, for enlightening us.
Yes.
I thought you were gonna grammar Nazi.
No.
Okay. Should I use the word Nazi? I'm sorry.
Now we're going to get banned from YouTube.
And we did that without not calling anyone each other, right? So yeah.
This time you're the idiot.
I mean, I'm the idiot once. You're like the idiot. Anyway, so I don't think they want to watch this. Yeah, that's like every day for us. So yeah. Okay.
So, but yeah, in the comments, guys, in case I made some kind of mistake, in case my understanding of thermodynamics is flawed in some ways, please enlighten me, especially the engineers and the chemistry people and the physicists. So yeah.
Yeah, and thank you guys again for all the love that you've given to our videos. We will be back on Wednesday with another video. Make sure you have the new posting schedule in your head. That is, we post every Wednesdays and Saturdays. Make sure that you have the bell icon pressed on your screen, as well as you have liked, shared, and subscribed to our channel. So thank you guys, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.